The other day we discussed a recent interview that Todd Howard did with the German gaming site GameStar, and we only focused on one thing, which was his comments on not being able to do crossplay because of Sony's position on the feature. Now today we're going to go through a lot more of his comments because there was a lot of different stuff discussed that has not been discussed before. The interview was about 24 minutes long, so we have a lot of stuff to cover, but first a big shout out to Reddit user UltraHacker9000 for translating the interview. I'll leave a link in the description to his post if you guys wish to read every single detail. So the first really interesting comment that came from Todd was when he was asked, "It's been 2 weeks since E3 and Fallout 76's presentation. Was the reaction okay for you, or was there anything you could have explained better?" Todd would reply with, "We were happy with the reaction. We want people to realize what the game is and what it is not. And that is really a unique thing. We generally don't like confusion because then people try to figure out what the game is on their own. For our classic hardcore Fallout fans, a lot of them love it, but we know a lot of them that really want a particular single player experience. It doesn't have that in the same ways. We understand that, feel the same ways. But it's a unique game that we are allowed to play, so we understand it better. We are happy with how the E3 turned out and how much attention we got." See, the issue I have with this remark is from the E3 presentation. Everything was confusing, and only after watching a few interviews I now understand what the game is. Even before E3, that original teaser trailer made it seem like this was the usual single player experience. Either way, I personally feel everything could have and should have been explained a little bit better. Specifically at the E3 showcase, Bethesda really should have mentioned how the story works, the anti-griefing system, why there are no human NPCs, and how PvP works. This would have stopped a lot of the confusion that ended up and still is lingering. GameStar would then ask if it's part of a strategy to take known franchises and put them into new genres. Todd would reply with, "I don't know. We take one step at a time. Every time we develop a game though, we want it to be its own thing and not just be a sequel that does this little bit of extra. Starfield is a whole new thing. The Elder Scrolls 6 will do its own thing. And if you look back at our other previous games, each of them has their own identity. We have fans that prefer Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 4. Some of them will prefer Fallout 76. We want each of them to stand on their own." I'll be honest, this answer does make sense. They want each game to feel and play different. Bethesda has mentioned a few times not wanting to play it safe, and this seems to go along with that belief. Next, GameStar would ask, "Is Fallout 76 some sort of test run for you guys? Sort of dipping in your toe to see if people like it?" Todd would say, "I don't know. I wouldn't say we're dipping our toe in it. I'd say we're jumping into the pool with this game. We'll see what happens. It's a good way for us to try something like this as opposed to trying it in a single player game. It's its own thing, very, very exciting for us, but a little bit scary." Multiple times now Todd Howard and Pete Hines have mentioned being scared and nervous about this jump, but from other interviews it at least seems Fallout 76 is a one-time multiplayer focused Bethesda Game Studios game. If the game succeeds and makes a lot of money, it will be interesting if that does affect the future of the company, something I made a video on recently. Continuing on, GameStar would ask, "Going back to Fallout 4, the multiplayer idea for Fallout 76 kind of came from the development time of that game. Were there other lessons that you learned from developing Fallout 4, something you guys could have done better?" And Todd would reply with, "We wanted every aspect to be better, from the graphics to how the controls work, the gunplay, enemy AI, overlapping quests. In Fallout 4, we tried so many new things and redid so many things we had before. We took our lessons and how you strike that balance going into 76. We improved the hit detection for 76, it feels much better, but you won't notice unless you go back to 4 and compare those two games. There's a lot of things we redid for Fallout 76 that I don't know if players will notice. Whether you liked or didn't like Fallout 4, it's clear the game did improve on many things that weren't all that great in Fallout 3, the big one being combat. Sure, I think we all know they made the experience more of a shooter rather than a role-playing game, but there are some great technical improvements, and it seems Fallout 76 continues improving in that category at the very least." Next, we get more of a direct question about the move away from human non-playable characters, in which GameStar asks, "You said there are no NPCs in Fallout 76. Isn't that a big challenge for the quest designers? Are there decisions to make?" Todd would say, "Yes, you mustn't forget we still have robots, terminals, holotapes, and other things that help the player decide. It is hard for the designers, yes, but the answer is you give the players tools where they can create scenarios on their own that we didn't dream up, and that happens in Fallout 4. If you ask the people what are their favorite stories, they often say situations where systems collide. I was doing this, then raiders attacked and a super mutant behemoth came over the hill, and then a vertibird came by. Then I met this new companion. in. This is what separates our games from other developers. Fallout 76 goes even harder into that direction. Personally, leaning on just that aspect is something that could work great or not. Like with Fallout 4, I felt those encounters were more impactful because they were more of side content and not the main piece. Also, Todd Howard would confirm Radiant quests are backed, and Todd would say yes. Also handcrafted ones. Fallout 76 has a story as well as Radiant quests. How this works, I'm guessing it will be like a robot version of Preston Garvey, which Radiant quests get boring after a few times in Fallout 4, so this does make me a little bit nervous. I will say GameStar really did a good job asking a lot of great questions, just something I wanted to mention, but next Todd would address griefing. We've talked about this a few times before, we know there's a system in place, but Todd gives a very detailed answer this time around. The interviewer asked, paired with PvP and nuclear missiles, a lot of people are concerned about griefers. The trailer shows some sort of bounty system. Is that part of punishing antisocial players? How do you want to encourage people to cooperate instead of just shooting on sight? Todd would respond saying, I don't want to force people into playstyles. I want systems that reward certain behavior. The thing is, why I cannot tell you how it works is because we're still messing with it. We have these same goals where we don't want other players ruining the experience. That's the worst for us to bear. If you stop playing the game because of another player acting like an asshole, we have encouraged the wrong things. At the same time, it's important for us to enable players to a certain kind of drama. As for the wanted level, maybe that was in one of the videos, we do have a system right now that if a player is acting up, let's say he murders somebody who didn't want to engage in combat, that's possible at the moment, yet very, very hard to do that. Maybe it will change. He gets a status as being wanted and cannot do a lot of things other players can do. All the other players can now see him, and he gets a big bounty on his head. He becomes some sort of epic enemy that every other player can go after. And as of right now, a player becomes wanted and everyone can see him, everyone will gang up on him, it's a lot of fun. How do you get to a wanted level? We're still messing with it. I think there is an interesting dynamic there. We don't want to put the brakes on too hard right now, but if the system is becoming too problematic for players, we will dial it back and make gaining the wanted level harder. I'm going to throw one more thing in that I think is important for people. All the quests we have designed are playable solo or in a team of 4. That means there are no quests focused on player versus player. We want to separate PvP and player-made challenges separated from the handmade quests. Essentially, there needs to be some raider-like characters that create some drama, but in a Red Dead Redemption-like way, a bounty system seems to be the way to stop griefers, as well as obviously it seems maybe after one encounter there's the challenge system, which you can try getting revenge or just move on. Honestly, I feel better about PvP now after these interviews, and I wish at the E3 showcase these details would have been mentioned. Now we get some details on more of the gameplay, with GameStar asking, can players pool their resources? Todd would say they can trade. You can have your own stash only you can access. But yes, there is a trading system based on bottle caps. That's the part of the economy run by players. You can also drop stuff if you want a specific item. I can simply drop it for you. Pretty much think any survival or honestly online game with how giving items to each other works. But what I'm most intrigued by is the possibility of opening a shop and selling items to other players. Also knowing that people cannot access your stash is a good thing, which obviously is different than most other survival games. As we get to our last few questions, this may be the biggest one asked, which has me scratching my head, and it's to do with microtransactions. GameStar would ask, Fallout 76 will include cosmetic microtransactions, but what is your stance on loot boxes with randomized content in general? Todd would say, we look at all of it. Games had a lot of different content for a long time. We did horse armor in 2006, 12 years ago, so we've seen all types of it. No matter what game you are doing, you have to figure out what feels good to you as a player. The player understands value. That's what we have learned. Players don't mind paying for value. So we went into 76 with two goals in mind. First, we want to offer extra content, and on the other hand, we don't want to separate the player base. For example, we don't want to release a DLC that some players have and some do not. So how do we offer DLC for free? We have an in-game store with cosmetics, and we're currently experimenting with other things too. The main goal is to make all players happy, never pay to win, and also earn them. So whatever currency we have to getting stuff, you can also earn them if you are somebody who plays the game a lot. That's two of the things for us when we play other games that we feel good about. Let's just say that. Our games are famous enough so we don't have to use other methods that might be too overbearing for players. When Todd says experimenting with other things, that has me both curious and concerned. Originally the answer was just cosmetics, but now it seems the tune has been changed a little bit. Obviously I'm not saying the game will be pay to win, Todd even mentions not doing that, but anything other than cosmetics could prove to be controversial, especially with how this industry has been. Finally, the last question is to do with the engine, in which GameStar asks, "You've been using more or less the same engine for years. What about Starfield and the Elder Scrolls 6? Todd would say, "I think a lot of people who are not used to making games don't understand what the engine stands for. They think engine is the one thing. We view it as technology. That is a lot of different pieces, and for every game, parts of that change. For example, the renderer, the AI, the animations, the script language, and so on. Some people talk about Gamebryo, but we have not used that in a decade. A lot of our engine contains a lot of middleware like Havoc. For Fallout 76, we have changed a lot. The game uses a new renderer, a new lighting system, and a new system for the landscape generation. For Starfield, even more of it changes, and Elder Scrolls 6 that's out there on the horizon even more. We like our editor that lets us create worlds really fast, and the modders know it really well. There are some base ways we create our games, and that will continue because that lets us be efficient, and we think it works best." So Todd essentially says their engine is nothing like Gamebryo, which they used years ago with games like Morrowind. But the issue many players have with Bethesda Game Studios made titles are the constant bugs, ridiculous long loading screens, lack of vehicles, and so on and so forth. I've said it before, their engine seems to be holding them back, and I get what Todd is saying. The engine is not one thing, it's a lot of different technology, but my issue would be the biggest areas have not been adjusted or improved enough. It doesn't seem like much will change with Fallout 76, at least with my biggest concerns with the engine, but Starfield will be very interesting, hopefully a game that can address some of players' biggest issues. But anyway, we discussed a lot of new information, and I want to know what you make of it down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or found any informative value, and consider subscribing for much more Fallout 76 content to come, and I'll see you later.